I stood in front of the ornate church mirror, adjusting my maid of honor dress and mentally calculating the exact amount my parents had stolen from my savings account. $127,843. Money I'd earned through years of careful investment and countless late nights building my consulting business. Isn't this perfect? My sister Madison twirled in her designer wedding gown, the one that cost exactly $23,651 of my money. I still can't believe how everything worked out. Meeting James at that charity gala, and now here we are. I forced a smile, remembering the real story of how she'd met my business partner. The story she didn't know. Yes, I replied softly. Everything worked out exactly as planned. 6 months earlier, I'd sat across from my parents at our family's weekly dinner, listening in shock as they casually announced they'd borrowed my savings for Madison's wedding. "Honey, you understand," Mom had said, patting my hand. "Your sister only gets married once, and James comes from such a good family. We couldn't let her have anything less than perfect. You had no right." I'd managed through clenched teeth. "That was my money." "Don't be selfish," Dad cut in. "Madison needs this. Besides, what were you doing with all that money anyway? It's not like you have anything important to spend it on." I'd looked at Madison, waiting for her to say something, anything. But she just sat there, examining her fresh manicure, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. What they didn't know was that those savings had been earmarked for a crucial business expansion. I'd been planning to buy out our biggest competitor, a deal that would have doubled our market share overnight. "I can't believe you're being so dramatic about this," Madison had sighed. "It's not like you have a wedding to save for. When was your last date anyway?" That night, I'd called James, my business partner, and the only person who knew the full extent of my family's emotional manipulation. "They took everything, James. The expansion money, my emergency fund, all of it." His voice had been calm, measured. "I might have a solution, but you'll have to trust me completely, and it's going to take time." "I trust you," I'd said without hesitation. James and I had built our company from nothing, working 80-hour weeks, surviving on coffee and determination. He was the brother I should have had instead of the sister who'd spent her life taking everything from me. "Good," he replied, "because I'm about to tell you how we're going to take over your family's company, and it starts with me meeting your sister." Now, watching Madison fuss with her veil, I thought about how perfectly James had played his part. The accidental meeting at the charity gala, the whirlwind romance, the proposal that had made headline news. James was, after all, one of the city's most eligible bachelors. My parents had been ecstatic. Their golden child marrying into serious money. It was everything they dreamed of. If only they knew that James's real value wasn't in his personal wealth, but in his shares of our company, Monarch Consulting. Shares that, combined with mine, would give us controlling interest in Anderson and Sons, my family's century-old business, once the merger papers were signed tomorrow morning. "Sarah?" Madison's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Earth to Sarah. "Mom wants to know if you've got the marriage license. She said she gave it to you for safekeeping." I patted my purse, feeling the weight of the envelope inside. "Got it right here." What I didn't mention was that nestled beside it was another envelope, one containing merger documents that would transfer control of Anderson and Sons to Monarch Consulting the moment Madison and James said, "I do." A knock at the door interrupted us. Mom bustled in, already dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Oh, my beautiful girls." She hugged Madison carefully, mindful of the expensive dress. Then she turned to me, her smile faltering slightly. "Sarah, dear, couldn't you have done something more with your hair? This is your sister's big day." I touched my elegant chin, the one that had cost $200 at the best salon in town. "It's fine, Mom." "Well, at least you're not completely overshadowing your sister's moment," she sighed. "Though that dress is a bit much, don't you think?" I glanced down at the designer gown I'd chosen specifically because it was more expensive than Madison's. A small petty revenge, but satisfying nonetheless. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, Mom continued. "Sarah, please try not to trip during the procession. And remember to smile. None of those serious business expressions you always wear." After she left, Madison turned to me, her face suddenly serious. "You are happy for me, aren't you, Sarah? I know you and James work together, and maybe you had a little crush on him." I cut her off with a laugh. "Trust me, Madison. James is exactly where he's supposed to be." My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Everything ready?" "All set," I replied. "See you at the altar." Madison was fixing her makeup one last time when Dad came in. "Princess, it's time." He turned to me. "Sarah, don't forget your part. Simple and dignified, remember?" I nodded, thinking of the other role I'd be playing today, the one that would change everything. As the wedding coordinator lined us up, I felt the weight of both envelopes in my purse. One would make my sister Mrs. James Porter. The other would make me CEO of Anderson and Sons. The organ music began, its triumphant notes filling the massive church. I stepped into line behind the bridesmaids, a small smile playing on my lips. "Ready?" the coordinator whispered. More than ready. I'd been preparing for this moment for 6 months. The doors opened, and I began my walk down the aisle, past hundreds of guests who had no idea they were about to witness not just a wedding, but a corporate takeover. At the altar, James stood tall and handsome in his tuxedo. He caught my eye and gave me the slightest of nods. Showtime. The ceremony proceeded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Madison floated down the aisle on Dad's arm, guests murmuring appreciatively at her designer gown. In the front row, Mom dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief, the massive diamond rings on her fingers catching the light. Rings bought with profits from the company I was about to take over. When the minister asked for the marriage license, I opened my purse with steady hands. For a moment, I held both envelopes, one containing the license, the other holding the merger documents James had already signed. One would bind my sister in marriage, the other would bind my family's company to mine. I handed over the marriage license, keeping the merger papers close. Their time would come soon enough. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing through the church. I watched James's face as he recited his vows, admiring how perfectly he played his role. Not a single person in the cathedral suspected that this wealthy, charming man was about to help me orchestrate the biggest business coup in our city's history. "I do," Madison said, her voice trembling with emotion. If only she knew what those words would really set in motion. As James slipped the platinum band onto Madison's finger, I felt my phone vibrate silently in my purse. Right on schedule, our lawyers confirming that everything was in place. At the reception, I stood to deliver my maid of honor speech. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with expensive decorations, all paid for with my stolen savings. When Madison first met James, I began, my voice carrying across the perfectly arranged tables. She thought she was the luckiest girl in the world. I paused, letting my eyes meet James's. Little did she know just how special their connection would truly be. The crowd chuckled, interpreting my words as sisterly affection. Only James understood their real meaning. As I sat down, Dad stood up, champagne glass in hand. Today isn't just about joining two people in marriage, he'd announced proudly. It's about joining two of the city's most prestigious families, the Andersons and the Porters, a perfect match. I smiled, thinking about how that perfect match would look very different by tomorrow morning. The party was in full swing when my phone buzzed again. The message was from our corporate attorney. Documents filed. Ready when you are. I caught James's eye across the dance floor and gave a subtle nod. He excused himself from Madison's side and made his way to where the senior partners of Anderson and Sons were gathered. "Gentlemen," I heard him say, "I'd love your advice on something. Could we step into the library for a moment?" I watched them follow him out. These men who had spent years dismissing me despite my Harvard MBA and proven track record. These men who had supported my father's decision to make Madison a vice president straight out of college while I built my own company from scratch. 20 minutes later, I entered the library to find exactly what I expected, a room full of pale-faced men holding copies of the merger documents. This is impossible. My father's voice shook as he looked up from the papers. "James, what is this?" "That," I said, stepping forward, "is a legally binding merger agreement between Monarch Consulting and Anderson and Sons. One that gives us controlling interest in your company. But you don't have the authority," one of the partners sputtered. "The shareholder agreement clearly states that any marriage between the families automatically triggers the merger clause," James finished smoothly. "A clause your lawyers insisted on when they learned of my family's wealth. They just didn't know I was already Sarah's business partner." Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You planned this? Both of you?" "Consider it karma," I said coolly. "You took my savings. I'm taking your company." "Madison will never forgive you," he threatened. "Madison will never know," I corrected him, "unless you want to explain to her how you stole her sister's money to pay for her wedding. How you've been embezzling from the company pension fund to maintain your lifestyle." "Oh yes," I added, seeing his expression. "We found those records too." The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of the reception. "The papers are already filed," James said quietly. "The only question is whether you want to handle this transition quietly or make a scene at your daughter's wedding." Dad's hands clenched into fists. "Sarah, please. We can work something out." "Like how you worked out taking my savings?" I asked sweetly. "No, Dad. This is happening. The only choice you have is how public you want this to become." One of the partners cleared his throat. "Robert, maybe we should discuss this calmly. If what they're saying about the pension fund..." Dad's shoulders slumped in defeat. James gathered the signed documents while I stood by the door, watching these powerful men come to terms with their new reality. "Oh, and Dad," I said as they filed out, "don't worry about paying me back for the wedding. Consider it a gift, the last one you'll ever get from me." Back in the ballroom, Madison was cutting the massive wedding cake, beaming at the cameras. Mom was showing off the table settings to her friends, bragging about the cost. If they only knew that every crystal glass, every flower arrangement, every perfect detail of this wedding had helped fund their own downfall. I picked up a champagne flute and watched the bubbles rise. By this time tomorrow, I would be CEO of both companies. The empire my grandfather built, that my father nearly destroyed, would be mine. "Everything okay?" James appeared at my side, his bow tie slightly crooked from the confrontation. Perfect, I replied, straightening his tie. Ready for your honeymoon? He grimaced slightly. 2 weeks in the Maldives with Madison. The things I do for our company. Just think of it as a business investment, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings. Across the room, Dad was drinking heavily at the bar, his face ashen. Mom was still circulating among the guests, unaware that her world had just shifted on its axis. And Madison? She was exactly where she'd always been, the center of attention, basking in her perfect moment, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. The night was still young, but the real celebration was just beginning. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sat in what had once been my father's office, reviewing the latest financial reports. The view of the city skyline was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, but everything else had changed. The heavy oak desk where Dad had once dismissed my business ideas was now mine. The wall of photos showing him with celebrities and politicians had been replaced with our company's new vision statement and organizational chart. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Just landed. Heading to the office. Madison's still mad. I'm cutting the honeymoon short for work. I smiled, remembering Madison's Instagram posts from the Maldives. Endless selfies of her living her best life. Completely unaware that her new husband had spent most of the trip on conference calls, helping me restructure both companies. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Come in. Mom entered, looking smaller somehow without her usual designer outfit and perfectly coiffed hair. Sarah, we need to talk. I gestured to the chair across from me. The same chair where I'd once sat as Dad lectured me about practical career choices. How could you do this to your own family? She demanded, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Interesting, I said, opening a folder on my desk. That's exactly what I wondered when I saw these bank statements. Care to explain why you and Dad withdrew $127,843 from my account without permission? That was different. It was for your sister's wedding. No, I corrected her calmly. It was theft. Just like Dad's creative accounting with the pension fund was theft. The only difference is, I found a legal way to take back what's mine. By tricking your sister, using James to what? Give her exactly what she wanted. A wealthy husband, a dream wedding, a luxury honeymoon. I leaned forward. Madison got everything she ever wanted. The fact that it helped me get what I wanted to is just good business. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Your father hasn't slept in days. He's talking about moving to Florida, selling the house. The house is company property, I reminded her. And yes, you'll need to vacate it by the end of the month. Where are we supposed to go? I hear Madison's guest house is quite comfortable, though you might want to hurry. Once she learns about the company, she might not be feeling very generous. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Madison. Excuse me, I told Mom. I need to take this. Mom stood shakily. At the door, she turned back. We're still family, Sarah. No, I said softly. We stopped being family the moment you chose Madison's one perfect day over my entire future. I answered Madison's call on speaker, letting Mom hear as she left. Sarah. Madison's voice was shrill. What's going on? James is acting weird, saying something about an emergency board meeting. And Dad's not answering his phone. Don't worry, I said smoothly. Everything will be explained at the meeting. You should come too. It involves the whole family. 2 hours later, I stood at the head of the conference room table, facing my assembled family and the board of directors. James sat to my right, his expression professionally neutral. As of this morning, I announced, the merger between Monarch Consulting and Anderson & Sons is complete. I will be serving as CEO of the combined companies. Madison jumped up. What? But Daddy, you said I was next in line for CEO. Dad couldn't meet her eyes. James cleared his throat. Actually, according to the new organizational structure, your position has been eliminated. The color drained from Madison's face as understanding dawned. You married me just to help her take over the company. The marriage is legal, James said calmly. And I'll continue to provide for you exactly as agreed in our prenup, which, if you recall, you were too excited to read carefully. Madison turned to me, tears streaming down her face. My own sister. You ruined everything. No, I corrected her. I took back what was mine and built something bigger in the process. By destroying our family, I pulled out the bank statements, sliding them across the table. Our family was destroyed the moment they stole my savings for your wedding. I just decided to stop being the victim and start being the victor. Mr. Anderson, one of the board members interrupted. Given the circumstances with the pension fund, we believe it's best if you announce your retirement immediately. Dad nodded numbly. Madison looked between our parents in confusion. Pension fund? What pension fund? Ask them, I suggested. Ask them about all the creative accounting they did to maintain their lifestyle, to pay for your cars, your clothes, your perfect wedding. The board members began filing out, leaving our family alone in the wreckage of what we'd once been. You'll regret this, Madison spat, grabbing her designer purse. All of it. Actually, I said, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. After they left, James loosened his tie. Well, that went about as expected. I stood by the window, watching my family exit the building below. Mom and Dad walking slowly, shoulders slumped. Madison storming ahead, already on her phone, probably calling her friends to complain about her evil sister. Any regrets? James asked quietly. I thought about years of being second best, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, of having my dreams dismissed and my savings stolen. Just one, I replied. That I didn't do this sooner. 1 year later, I stood in the same spot, but the view was different. Under my leadership, the merged company had doubled its market share. The pension fund had been fully restored, the corporate culture transformed. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Heard about the company's success. Ready to talk? I deleted it without responding. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. James appeared in my doorway. Board meeting in 5. Ready to show them the expansion plans? I gathered my papers, pausing to straighten a new photo on my wall. One showing me and James at the company's last charity gala. Both of us smiling genuinely at the camera. You know what, James? I've never been more ready. Sometimes revenge isn't just about getting even. Sometimes it's about proving that the people who underestimated you were wrong. That the person they dismissed as second best could become the best. And I had proof. 12 stories of prime real estate, 2 thriving companies merged into an empire, and 1 perfect revenge served exactly the way I'd planned it. Madison got her perfect wedding. I got everything else. And that was the best revenge of all.